Welcome to the Let's Talk Politics Alabama podcast with your host, Daniel Stover and Russ Sanders, where we take a look at Alabama politics like a drive down I-65 from North Alabama to the state capital in Montgomery and all the way to the Sugar Sand Coast.
I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit, for political purposes, my opponent's youth and inexperience.
We choose truth over facts.
I don't want to speak negatively. I said, though, that if I lose this election, maybe I'll end up moving to Alabama.
Someone has once said that actually, as long as there are final exams, there will be prayer in schools.
All right. And welcome back to the Let's Talk Politics Alabama podcast. We are in double digits. Yes, we have hit podcast number 10. So tonight we get to celebrate with a special friend of ours. I guess we call him a friend. He's become a friend, at least. The man considered the 16th most powerful and influential person in Alabama, writer at Yellowhammer News, Breitbart News, and of course you can't leave out the Mobile Lanyap, host of FM Talk 1065 out of Mobile, I believe it is, and former radio host in Huntsville's WVNN. And of course I cannot leave this part out. The man that Dale Jackson self-professed owes his entire radio career to, Mr. Jeff Ford.
Wow, it was like what an introduction.
Well, you know, you can save that one for later.
Well, I appreciate it nonetheless.
Oh, so let's see. It's been a while since we actually got to see you. Probably close to 2 years now. But you've expanded a little bit since then. You know, you've earned the right to wear black socks and sandals and officially tell dad jokes. Is that right?
That now I've entered fatherhood, which is unlike anything I've ever encountered in my life.
Lots of diapers.
How old?
We just turned a week ago. We just turned 8 months.
You're a little bit behind me then. Mine's at 20 months. She's a handful.
I remember those days. Whole lot less sleep.
You're like the veteran here, right?
I've got, let me think, 7, about to be 8 next month, and 4. So, yeah, I'm the veteran of the group here now.
Very good.
So he is outnumbered in this house, though.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, I had to get a male cat just to have a buddy, so that I wouldn't be as badly outnumbered. I mean, we went to adopt a dog, and what's the first thing the girls say? We want a girl dog. Yeah. I'm already outnumbered.
The number's just working against you, man.
Well, here we are. It is September 13th that we're recording this on. It'll come out on Friday. But I want to take a minute and just reflect back on September 11th. You know, we just passed that on Saturday. It's always a time that I always sit and reflect myself. Always think back, when Pearl Harbor was bombed, Roosevelt, he said his famous words were December 7th, a day that will live in infamy. Well, I feel that's the same way on September 11th for our generation. I can remember I had gotten to work already in Huntsville. I was sitting there listening to, of all things, Rick and Bubba on the radio, when they started talking about there was a smoke and a plane had hit the World Trade Center. And then, it just piled up from there, one after the other, the Pentagon, then the collapse. I remember a friend of mine and we left at lunchtime and went to Applebee's just so that we could see a TV. Hey, internet TV wasn't a thing back then. We barely had the internet. But yeah, I mean, Russ, what were you doing at that point?
I was at Lawrence County High School in ninth grade, I believe it was biology class, Coach McDowell's class, when the first plane hit. But it wasn't really until I got to Ronald Thrasher's class. Mr. Thrasher, apologize for the dog. He was a welding teacher, and we just watched nonstop coverage of the attack there. And I remember being in ninth grade. That's a little young, not young, but it's pretty young. And I remember being very angry, and it just reinforced me wanting to join the military. And I just remember being fascinated. It was the first time I really started paying attention to what's going on in the world. And I just remember just being glued to a television set just constantly and just feeling just utterly angry. But what I remember most about September 11th was September 12th. And what I mean by September 12th was everybody was proud to be an American. Everybody was united. Everybody was friendly. Law enforcement was respected. Military was respected. Everybody loved each other. And we wasn't worried as much about fighting each other, but we wanted to get the guys that did this, the guys and gals that did this, and make them pay for it. And that's what I remember most about September 11th was actually September 12th and how everybody was proud to be an American.
Jeff, you're the I think you're the oldest of the two of us here, of the three of us. So
I had just graduated from Auburn, and then this is it kind of tells you where I was at this time in my life. I was still in bed when all this happened. I'd gone out the night before, maybe had a few too many, and woke up. And I know it was like during the week, and I can't remember what the occasion was, but I do remember waking up and somebody had this is before text messaging and all of that. Somebody had emailed me because I got up, checked my email. That was what we did back then. And hey, you need to go out and get blood right now. I was like, why? What? And it was like this link to the Red Cross. So then I, kind of turned on the TV, and there it was. By then, they had already kind of speculated that it was probably a terror attack and things were moving in that direction. And I remember being pissed off, angry, and then it became a little sad after that. Like, now what? Like, how does this happen? And you go through all these checks in your mind, and then you do all the reflection. And then I think I'm kind of where Russ was. That what are we gonna do now? I'm ready to go. And you kept waiting to find out kind of more and more and more. And then I guess it really changed history. And you look at how you live your life now compared to back then, September 10th, 2001, going to the airport and things you do. And maybe at that time, you didn't realize how much this was going to change our lives, and it significantly changed our lives.
I remember it was a couple months after. It might have been a month or so after September 11th. There was a fishing trip scheduled that I got to go on, but we were flying from UCLA, University of Calhoun Longside Airport. Yes, Russ, I went there to Arkansas. And I remember when we were departing Arkansas coming back, they literally gave us 10 minutes to get the pilot to get from the FBO to the airplane and get airborne in 10 minutes. That was all the time that they were allowing for that to happen. It was interesting, to say the least. Just traveling.
I remember I remember like kind of when the TSA was first coming to, and everything that had changed with going because I was flying a lot back then. But I remember how it just kind of gradually got more stricter and stricter and stricter over time. And I always thought, watching that evolution, that it's more strict now than it was immediately after 9/11.
Well, I agree. I mean, I don't do a lot of traveling. Russ does a whole lot more than I do. But I would just from the things that I've seen and heard people talking about, it's definitely more strict now than it was. But yeah, but we just wanted to take a minute, just remember 9/11, all the people that perished at the hands of a bunch of terrorists. Um, it's I was trying to explain it to my 7-year-old a little bit this year, why we take and hold this day special. Uh, it's not easy. It, you know, if you didn't live through it, it's not easy to pass that down and not just be, you don't want to show them the images of people jumping and stuff like that, but just to kind of walk through what happened that day. So
Let me ask you something. How do you, when you have a 7-year-old and you're trying to like find your comparative basis? Obviously, COVID's going to be that comparison. I was thinking a lot about this. How do you compare 9/11 to COVID? It seems like it had much more of a dramatic impact all at once, and maybe that's why we remember 9/11 like we do. But
mhm.
COVID's had a much bigger impact on our lives, I think, than 9/11. Will we 20 years from now, will we remember COVID the same way we talk about 9/11?
I don't know. Uh, I know we will remember a lot of the choices that have been made during COVID, um, probably more than COVID itself. We had talk about this week before last. We kind of went through the COVID stuff because our schools just went to a point of requiring mask again.
Well, and then that's every public policy argument can be boiled down to this. It's the individual, the rights of the individual versus the good of the collective. I don't care what it is. I've been in part of many of these policy discussions, and I don't know that it's. I mean, if you go too far on the rights of the individual, you come off as selfish. And people, that's not a redeeming quality at all.
No.
That's not a good look. However, you know, but like I said, again, it's always that you can look at anything. We could be talking about Second Amendment. We could talk about abortion. We could talk about any hot button public policy issue. And you can always get it down. If you boil it down to its purest form, it's the rights of the individuals versus the good of the collective. And I mean, that's kind of the modern discussion of politics right now worldwide.
See, that's the reason that we're the guys that are just trying to do this one day a week, and you're the one that does it every day.
Well, I mean, I'm not. I had to hard hog the floor here, but I've been thinking a lot about that kind of stuff too lately, particularly when it comes to these COVID measures, because it doesn't get any more rights of the individual versus the good of the collective than a global pandemic.
Oh
So
yeah.
what is what? And I think what's lost in a lot of this, it is using the power of government to preserve the good of the collective and not really recognizing the rights of the individual. And lost somewhere in this whole discussion is the art of persuasion. Like, we need to persuade people to do the right thing, exercise your right as an individual for the good of the collective. And that's how you get, I think, to a better solution. You need to be persuading people in an effective way. And this is why you're president of the United States. I mean, Jeff Poor couldn't do this, but the president of the United States should be able to say, or we need to rally around these COVID mitigation measures for the good of the collective, for the good of society, and get people to convince to exercise their individual rights to make that choice. But they're not interested in that. They just want to use executive fiat to tell you what to do.
Yep. I completely agree. Russ, you had something you were gonna say?
You
They,
can't force it. It's not a realistic approach because we don't live in North Korea. If you look at what the ideal, the extreme or the illogical extreme is of what's being proposed here, for it to work properly, you got to have a system like North Korea. And that's the problem with the left liberal ideology in general. It's predicated on this notion that everybody's going to do what you want them to do, and it's completely devoid of what human behavior really is, right? There's a Billy Graham used to say, like he was comparing communism and capitalism, but for the sake of this discussion, we're going to compare our system of government versus a government run kind of authoritarian system. And one is like, for it runs on this assumption everybody's going to do the right thing. Like, socialism is that, right? That everybody's going to do the right thing, but we're all that's branding us as saints. That saints are going to play by the rules, are always going to do the right thing. Whereas when you have a market driven system where people can make their own choices and do the right thing and they're rewarded for such, that's more of a system for sinners. And I think that's a realistic, but that's more of a realistic approach. And that's what the American left a lot of times, they're never going to get everybody to operate and sing to the same hymnal as them or what they want them to do. It's a behavior thing that they're totally ignoring.
Absolutely. I have that whole argument as well because, we've got people. Well, instead of doing what they're supposed to for the good of everybody else. And we don't want to. We want to think everybody's going to do the right thing, but
It's
like you
not
said,
necessarily true, right?
it's not going to happen.
It's unrealistic to think that people are always going to do the right thing. You know how human behavior is.
That's right.
Should I eat that extra? Should I have that dessert? And you're like, well, no, you probably shouldn't, but you're probably going to have it.
I'm gonna do it anyways.
And that's what people do. So that's the whole problem with a lot of this COVID government response. Government isn't necessarily equipped through just government alone. That's why you need like real leadership in government to convince people to do the right thing. And instead of this strange place where we are right now, where everything's hyper politicized, but it's also like using shame as a tactic to get you to do something. Maybe that works on the margins, but wholesale, people don't like that. They don't like that approach. It turns people away, and I think it makes people. So you gotta. It's like this whole discussion we're having about 9/11. On 9/12, we were kind of different. We kind of rallied together. And I don't know how you do it. Like I said, if I did, then I would have ran for president or something. But that's the point. And we don't have this trust. Russ mentioned a lot of mistrust. We don't have trust in our institutions right now. We don't have trust in government institutions. We don't have we see how everything's so hyper politicized. Everything seems like it's just trying to score points for your political cause or whatever. But truth be told, you got to rebuild that trust, and then I think people will be like, okay, this isn't some that. Instead, it's no. I'm really trying to help you. I'm really trying to tell you what we think is the right thing to do. We may not be 100% correct, but we're really trying to do. We're acting in good faith here, and when you start changing that tone and that rhetoric, I think you get more people maybe coming around your way. But I don't know if the politics line up for it.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, Well, I mean, that's the reason why our government was actually set up for you to go serve and come back home. It actually wasn't set up for them to go to Washington and live there.
Well, we created an elitist class, and that's what you see, the good enough for good enough for thee, but not good enough for me, or however that goes. But the point being that you create this elitist class, and you start to lose that's where the distrust comes from. So are these people being human and making mistakes and engaging in risky behavior like you and I might do? But we put these people up on a pedestal and we expect them to be saints and live by their own rules. Or do they really not believe this stuff? Is this something they're just telling us it's all a virtue signaling exercise and they want you to think that they're good? So when Gavin Newsom goes to French Laundry or whatever it is, then is he, does he really, is he making the mistake and engaging in risky behavior that he probably shouldn't? Or does he not really believe this? And I guess that gets down back to that leadership question, the art of persuasion, and that works against persuading people.
Yeah, you would think that these politicians would be a little bit more versed in this. I mean, they didn't get there overnight. All of them except for a couple of them. Now, Barack Obama went from, down here to up here just like that. So anyway, but talking about the art of persuasion, though, you wrote an article. Let's see, a few days ago, I believe it was, talking about McCutcheon and our prison and a special session that might be coming up. What are you hearing as far as like the votes go? They're not going to have a special session unless they know they've got the votes. Are you hearing anything?
I think they got the votes here today, and I think it's pretty solidly had the votes. They had to do some compromises. Look, two prisons, the two mega prisons, Escambia County, Elmore County. It looked like that they're a done deal. And there's the third facility. This was on Kay Ivy's plan, the Bibb County. People there in Bibb County didn't really want it anyway. So to get votes from some of these places that might be against it. This is where Bentley went wrong during his term, because you had these senators that had a very their economies are very dependent on these big prison systems, and you had these municipalities, particularly Bullock and Barber County, Clayton, Alabama, Union Springs, down there, kind of between a little southish of Auburn. They, not a whole lot going on there economically. And these cities, these municipalities build these big elaborate sewer systems and water systems for these prisons. And if the state pulls the rug up out from under them, then they're stuck with the tab. So you always had these state legislators who are like, no, and you think about the jobs and the economic impact. That was always the hang up. So by not building this third mega prison in Bibb County, they're going to go rehab some of the older facilities, and at least one of them is going to be down in Bullock or Barber County. According to the draft bill I've seen, one's in Limestone County and Donaldson and Jefferson County are just going to get rehab, and that's going to keep some of that economic impact together and not leave some of these cities out to dry. I think that helps. I think they got the vote. Where they're going to get hung up, there is like a lease build plan, and it's kind of not a lease build plan, but a design build plan, I should say, and where they kind of design it as they go along. And the idea is there with the Department of Justice saying, you need to act on your prison system or we're going to come in and do it for you. That there's a sense of urgency, and it's forcing them to take a little more costly approach. That might be, you might lose a vote or two there, but I think it sells through the House. I think you'll have some opposition, the Andrew Sorrell types, the guys who, they take very principled stands, or whatever you want to call that, the more right of center ideologically. And then in the Senate, I think it's going to be more, probably you'll get more widespread broad support, but the Senate's what really matters, because the Senate is the House. They could just steamroll any opposition. They have enough votes. The Senate, they could really slow it down. They could filibuster. They could run out the clock on a special session. So you got to have the votes in the Senate. And as of right now, I think they're pretty solidly where they need to be, 50% plus one or whatever. You don't have a BIR. You don't have any of the stuff you do in a normal legislative session. So it just looks to me they're in good shape in the Senate right now. There's going to be some tweaking, but I fully anticipate last week of September, first week of October, somewhere in there, CAVI will call it a special session.
Now,
is it true that we can increase capacity?
They are so what this plan does, I am told, and I guess it remains to be seen. It hasn't been exactly details haven't been released to the public, but bits and pieces have been leaked to the media. Is that it's not going to be enough beds. It's not going to have enough beds, and we're already overcrowded. So you have the situation. How do you have enough beds? How are you going to address that? And I am told by, I think it was, we had a member on last week, said that it leaves open the possibility. Oh, it was Ledbetter, Nathaniel Ledbetter, the House Majority Leader, told me that it leaves open the door for more additions as they come into more financing, as they're more able to. But they need to get some of these remedial procedures underway right now to please the DOJ. So they're moving in that direction. But you do raise a good point, and this is what a lot of critics say. This plan does not have enough beds. How is it going to address one of the Eighth Amendment criteria of the cruel and unusual punishment of spacing and inadequate living conditions? And that remains to be seen.
Pronsi had told us that there was actually some legislation or from the DOJ that there were some certain numbers that we couldn't pass. I guess that's where Russ was coming from with that. But I guess one of the biggest red flags that I'm seeing, and I think I'm not sure who it was, but you had wrote another article. You're good at that,
That's what I do for a living, unfortunately.
Yeah, I saw though where there's a possibility that they're going to try to use COVID rescue funds from the federal government to do this. That's not going to fly, is it?
So, and let me try to explain it to you. The way this works, and it's not clear to the Treasury Department, the federal Treasury Department, the Biden administration will allow this, but they have given the states money to make up for lost revenue because of COVID. So when the federal government said you really should shut down, the states and municipalities lost tax revenue. So this COVID relief money is intended to make up for the lost revenue of state governments, which makes it a little more palatable, I guess. But here's the thing, we're sitting here today, guys, and we hear, y'all all hear the stories about ICU beds and the lack of, and how hospitals are really struggling with this. Do you think the public is going to be okay with the state of Alabama spending money on prison beds instead of ICU beds?
Without an effective communication campaign of why it's important. And then still people won't understand. People like to fuss about, well, that person's staying out of jail and they're walking the street, and we can't get this meth head that lives
right. Well,
on the street. Those people might understand it, but generally speaking, no. They ain't gonna be cool with it.
Well, it used to be that the whole idea of money for prisons was a third rail. That people, that was last on their priorities. Now, the legislature's kind of had their hand forced with the Department of Justice and having to act here, but that now it seems, I don't know, we're in an era kind of, especially the Republican primary. Everything in Alabama, I don't care what you say, the general election is not as relevant as the Republican primary and that Republican runoff, because that's where all the decisions are being made.
Yep.
So you're not approaching this from the typical, cookie cutter approach. You don't have more. It's not an audience for mass consumption. This is a very specific audience you have to please, which is the Republican primary voter in Alabama, and they're ideological, more conservative than a lot of Republicans around the country. Are they going to be okay with borrowing money first off, and spending it on prisons? So that's the question, and I don't know. I haven't polled it. Todd Stacy of Alabama Daily News did a poll, and I thought it was fairly accurate. It's the way the questions were framed made it seem like, well, that would you be okay if Alabama did this thing that they have to do, or they're going to, face a takeover from the Department of Justice? And it's kind of a leading question. It makes say, yeah, go ahead and fix the prison system. But I also think this, Daniel and Russ, that we're in this kind of, back to blue, where we're in Republican politics. Maybe it's different in other places, but in Alabama Republican politics, we believe in strong law enforcement. We want to put criminals away. It is a very pro police environment for who you're trying to talk to. So you can't have a sound criminal justice system without some kind of incarceration mechanism. And does that make it more of a better sell if you're a Republican legislator running a Republican primary? Maybe. I don't know.
I think that's where we've got to have not just prison reform, but almost court reform as well. I mean, we talked about it with one of our previous guests that's running for circuit judge here. You got to have the drug courts and the community corrections. In fact, I think community corrections is one of those things that may be coming up on a bill before long that's going to be mandated across the state. You got to have those type of things that's how you lower that prison population, I guess, rather than, sending the guy that's, been brought up on 3 drug charges 3 different times, to prison. You send him through community corrections to try to alleviate that a little bit.
But I don't know that the public is there on that. And you may be right that we need to look at that. But I think if you try to sell that to a Republican base, they're going to reject that. They're not going to accept that as it'll be maybe 5th on the priority list of possible solutions. That becomes problematic. Well, and you see, like, here's also the problem, guys. Like, if these guys got to run a Republican primary, they do have a challenger, and they all of a sudden they open their left flank, or the right flank opens up to a some blowhard type right winger, and the type I'm talking about. This is, look at this guy. He voted for the gas tax. He didn't do anything to step in when Ivy was shutting us down. And now he wants to let criminals out of jail. Are you kidding me? Is this the guy you want to represent you in Montgomery? And you see how that becomes problematic for an incumbent. So some of these guys in the legislature have nothing to worry about. They're going to run and they're going to, they're not even going to have opposition in the general. But I do think some of these guys are really worried about that as a possibility, that they could get challenged on the right flank, and they're a little nervous about going all in on a prison solution, particularly one that involves any kind of sentencing or criminal justice reform.
I think we have one, a neighboring district that is very much in that boat. I don't know what the answer is on that, Russ.
A lot of, it's not the answer, but it's a further comment. So we was talking about how the legislature doing that. They created a Class D felony, which left a lot of these people where prison wasn't an option, or they was left in the county jail. And who gets the blame for all these guys walking the street? It's not the legislature. It's not the judges. It's not anybody. It's the law enforcement. They're like, why aren't you doing your job? And law enforcement, gets beat up all the time, because people don't understand the entire complexity of the criminal justice system, and it's very hard to explain that whole, from start to finish, how a case gets processed.
That's and that's absolutely right. Understanding how the criminal justice system actually works, it's like there's a civics lesson that needs to be taught. However, it's unfortunate because the reality is people don't. Since they don't have that understanding, they don't have that grasp of how the system works. They are it's reactionary. So the reaction is going to be to punish whoever's in charge, throw the bums out or whatever. And that's what these incumbents, I think, are worried about, that they're going to have to account for that. But maybe they don't. Maybe they just blame the police. But even then, you have sheriff's contests, you have mayoral elections, city council elections, and that's the type of thing that those guys got to deal with as well.
I mean, I arrested a guy. I arrested one person 3 times for manufacturing. I mean, it's just I mean, people don't manufacture as much anymore, but it's just a one example of meanie of, why is this guy out?
So basically, it's all your fault, right, Russ?
Yes, it's law enforcement's fault.
I think you're right, Jeff. I think there is it's not just something that has happened recently. It's something that has been lacking. If we've quit teaching civics, we don't have a foundation of how things operate. I mean, I can't sit here and tell you how the court system operates. I just know I don't want everyone to have to go in it. Maybe that's their way of trying to keep people out and keep them from being involved in the court system. Is just, you don't know anything about it. You don't want to be in it.
Well, I here's the thing. Like, I hear what y'all are saying, and I've had these discussions about how do you approach this. And first off, the DOJ complaint is nothing about sentencing reform. Maybe that's a mechanism to get the prison population, the incarceration numbers down, and make the prisons more sustainable. But it's not a politically viable solution. So it comes down to that. Like, that's the discussion. Like, do you think these legislators will walk that plank? And you got to keep in mind, I mean, everything's kind of market-based political situation we have here. And like I said about the Republican primary, that's your audience. That's who you got to win over. And if we start dabbling in that, well, that's what Democrats do. I'm not for that. Mm-hmm. And then that becomes the problem. So then that's why the legislature, I think, they're trying to avoid that discussion for now. And it may be a while before we ever have real, like, truth in sentencing and real meaningful criminal justice reform in the state of Alabama.
Well, if we can ever get a deal on the prisons, that's the next hurdle they're going to have to face, as far as population control in the prisons. So, but let's see what else we got here. Back August 23rd, Jeff, you wrote a story on Linda Blanchard dropping out of the U.S. Senate race and making a bid for governor. I know I've heard Ziegler's name. Kay Ivey's running. I don't remember who all else I've heard, but now Linda Blanchard. I mean,
I think that's gonna happen very soon. Actually, I think Tim James is another name you want to watch. Now, Tim James has a press conference scheduled for Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. on the steps of the Capitol. I don't know that that's necessarily him announcing a run for governor, but I would keep an eye on that. It's either that or maybe he's endorsing somebody, or there's something going on there. The press release is strangely worded to suggest maybe he is doing something else. Linda Blanchard, I think, is probably going to happen. I asked her this. Sorry about that. I asked her this on my show if she was, considering that, and she said she would do whatever it took to help Trump. So what I think she is doing here, I think she wants that Trump endorsement, and that she's using that as leverage because Trump wants Mo Brooks. Well, I'll get out of Mo's way if Trump comes in and endorses me. I have $10 million at my disposal. Would Mo Brooks rather have to run against me with these deep pockets, or would he rather have me running for governor? I think we know the answer to that question. However, I would just add, she's not going to just go do that. She needs something in return. Mm-hmm. But I think she's going to do that. I think she has I think still a long shot candidate to be governor of Alabama, but probably a much better shot at governor than U.S. Senator right now.
It seems like, and maybe this is just me, but it seems like we're relying on the Trump endorsement to get us elected for a lot of the offices that are up now or coming up, I know Trump's probably one of the best presidents we've had, especially in our lifetime. But I don't know if it's going to carry the weight that they're expecting. It's going to carry a lot of weight. I mean, we
Right.
saw what happened in Coleman. You think it's going to carry the weight though that they're expecting?
I don't know that Trump's going to endorse in the Alabama gubernatorial election. First off, but I do think candidates try to run parallel to Trump. They try to. I mean, we really saw this in 2018 when Twinkle Kavanaugh was running for lieutenant governor, and it looked like Twinkle Kavanaugh and Donald Trump did that ad. It looked like they were separated at birth. The way she had, I mean, but that was the whole idea, right? Oh, well, they must be, they even have the same hairstyle. It looks like, or whatever. But I don't know if we're still there where we are with this right now, or not. But I think if you're a Republican politician in the state, and that's just where the party is right now. That's just where we are politically. Then you got to go where the win. You got to go for the W. And I don't know that it's necessarily a foregone conclusion that if you get the Trump endorsement, I mean, Luther Strange would be U.S. Senator right now if that were the case.
Yep.
But what I also know is you need to have him on your side because Jeff Sessions is not a U.S. Senator right now, probably because a lot of what Trump had to say. So you can't back away from Donald Trump. You got to, and this is problematic for Katie Britt. This is problematic for Jessica Taylor. Somewhat problematic for Linda Blanchard, although I'm not sure she was really getting much traction. But you gotta show that connection somehow. You gotta show it. And I think just the way Republican elections go right now in the state, for now, this could change. But for right now, that attachment really works politically in Alabama.
Well, you mentioned about her kind of making a deal of I'll get out of Mo's way. I mean, last I looked at the poll numbers, she wasn't much in the way. I think she was polling less than 2%. But
she. I'll tell you what, Daniel, though, she does have $10 million, or she said $5 million she's already committed. Will she spend it? I don't know. Maybe she will, maybe she won't. But she would, since she is willing to spend up to $10 million. $10 million in Alabama, and Alabama politics goes a long way.
Yep.
So you don't want her pulling the trigger on that and creating this circular firing squad. That is, I don't think Mo Brooks wants that at all, because there will be attack ad after attack ad that I think she could bankroll easily. I just think the Mo Brooks campaign would like her out of the way. They recognize Katie Britt's not going anywhere, and they recognize that Jessica Taylor probably isn't going to poll well enough to make a difference. They would rather have her with her deep pockets in that gubernatorial lane and out of the Senate lane.
Well, I mean, hey, if it went down to 2, I think we'd all be happy because we'd know on primary night who it was.
Well, we know who the 2 are going to be. I mean,
absolutely.
It's silly to think it's going to be anybody besides Katie Britt or Mo Brooks, but you don't. That third variable in the way does cloud things and make things strategically a little more difficult for the front runner, at least in this scenario.
Isn't Katie Britt's coffers pretty deep herself?
Yeah, but I don't know that they're 10 million. I mean, maybe they will be ultimately in the long run, but I think they're kind of playing it by ear. What I would watch for, guys, Mo Brooks has a really big lead, but I keep wondering what the Club for Growth is going to do, because if y'all are paying attention to 2020, they went really hard after Bradley Byrne, and they were effective. They were also effective in AL2 down in Dothan, down in Wiregrass, Montgomery, Wetumpka, with Prattville. That AL2 district just hammering Jeff Coleman. And I think Barry Moore, who barely just squeaked out by 600 votes over Jessica Taylor to get into that runoff, that's why he's a congressman today, because Club came in and they just went scorched earth against Jeff Coleman, and he wound up winning in that primary. He got delayed because of COVID. He wound up winning by 20 points. Now, it didn't work out for Club in Jerry Carl's race with Bill Hightower. They backed Hightower. None of those accusations really stuck, but it's a wholly different. That's a totally different sort. Like where I'm at right now. It's a different media market. It's a different kind of. You have to do it a little. I think politics is a little different, and I just don't think those attack ads worked at all. But they certainly worked at AL2. Would they work statewide? They hurt Bradley Byrne. If Club for Glove comes in for Mo, and they've already endorsed Mo Brooks, and if they come in and they start hammering Katie Britt, that could be something she's got to. They got to know that's coming in the back of their mind.
Well, I mean, even we had Mo at our executive meeting this past week, and he's even talked about, what's coming as far as attack ads against him. And he's already said, hey, I'm getting prepared for him. So,
I mean, the problem with Mo, Congressman Brooks, I consider him a friend. The problem is, though, it's Todd Stacey said this, and I think it's spot on accurate. He swings at too many pitches in the dirt. That you have a 40, 50 point lead, and you have like a 52 point lead or something over Linda Blanchard when they got their dust up, public dust. Why are you responding to these people? And if you're looking for a vulnerability for Congressman Brooks, it's that you can bait him into getting in one of these little minor irrelevant skirmishes, and it does more harm for him to participate in than it does good. And it's like kind of like a judgment of picking and choosing your battles. And that's where if I'm Katie Britt and I'm looking for a vulnerability, I'm gonna just kind of rope a dope Mo Brooks into whatever and get him to start come out swinging really hard, and that maybe makes it better for my chances to be the U.S. Senate nominee.
okay.
Is there any chance that? No, you said Linda Blanchard dropping out and doing a governor race. Any of the other Senate candidates, you see them dropping out doing any other kind of races, gubernatorial race? There's plenty of statewide races.
I don't, no matter what happens, this is probably a good thing for Katie Britt's political future. She's going to build some statewide name ID. She's going to spend a lot of money here. I think it's still probably really tough for her to be the nominee. And I could be wrong here, but if you're asking me to bet on it, it's Mo Brooks as the Republican nominee, but she sticks with it. I can't see her dropping out and running for something else, but I could see her running maybe for lieutenant governor in the next cycle, 2026. I think she'd be a lock for that office, actually. As for Jessica Taylor, I don't know. She's all there is some money coming her way. There seems to be some outside money that sees something in her that's promising politically. I think she could go on and run for Congress. We don't know what the district lines are going to look like after the census. She lives in Prattville. What if Gary Palmer's district is drawn and picks up Watauga County and picks up where her home is? Gary Palmer is term limited, or he's self-term limited. She can run for Congress and run for that seat after redistricting. I think she's got a political future ahead. So I think it behooves, besides Linda Blanchard, it behooves Katie Britt and Jessica Taylor to stick it out here, and then maybe perhaps they go on to do something else politically that is that their future doesn't end with this election.
One thing you said, and you said it came from, I think you said Todd Stacey actually said it. Mo Brooks swinging at pitches in the dirt. Okay. So here's a question. As congressman, he's been able to, kind of be out there and able to do that. As senator, just like Shelby and Sessions, you got to be able to. You're the only two. We got two. That's it. You got to be able to work across the aisle. Or is Mo going to be able to set that rhetoric aside and actually do what we need him to do to support Alabama? I mean, I
Is that
see.
what is
I
that
s-
what the electorate want? Do they want a go on? Do they want Richard Shelby 2.0? I think if they did, it would be a much closer race. I think the GOP base in Alabama kind of whenever the sales pitch is this, we got to have somebody that can work with the other side so we can bring home federal funding, more government money to Alabama. That is a perfectly valid discussion, a perfectly valid premise. The problem with that is, what does the Republican base say? Hey, we got to have a guy that can bring home more government money to Alabama. We're dependent on the federal government. I just don't think that's a good sales pitch. I don't think that is something that people on the Republican side in wholesale fashion. Now, don't get me wrong. There's going to be people that believe that, but I don't think that is a necessarily a winning approach to say that I'm going to be the one that brings home the bacon for Alabama. And there's something that seems just unseemly about government spending, and you're going to be the pro government spending senator. But with Mo Brooks, maybe there's a case to be made. I mean, even though a lot of it, what's going on in Huntsville right now is probably the work of Richard Shelby. He's still the congressman there. It still happens, but I think Mo Brooks was elected to Washington D.C. and he's always elected by overwhelming margins in both the Republican primary and in the general election. And he's doing exactly what people in the fifth congressional district want him to do. If he gets the nomination, he will do. I don't think he changes. And I think the people of Alabama will have sent him there with a mandate to say that's how we want you to be in Washington, D.C. Now, let's compare that to Tommy Tuberville. We had these same discussions about Tommy Tuberville compared to Bradley Byrne, compared to Jeff Sessions. But when you look at it, there's something there's a moderating element, a moderating influence in the U.S. Senate versus the House. And maybe that forces Mo Brooks to kind of temper his approach. It's just the culture is different. It's the quote unquote world's most exclusive club. And I think behaviorally, he's doing what he's got to do to win a Republican primary, a revved up political base that is angry and pissed off at Joe Biden. He is exactly what a lot of people want, whether you agree with that or disagree with that. He is answering a certain constituency, but maybe he becomes something totally different when he's in the body of the U.S. Senate, because it does do that to people. It did it to Jeff Sessions. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you remember when he was the state's attorney general versus when he was a U.S. senator. There's something that makes you a little more even keel when you get to the U.S. Senate. You don't go unless you're like a Rand Paul or somebody like that. That's very, very ideological to the core. There's something that makes you moderates you or makes your rhetoric cools it down a little bit. I just think it's more of it lends itself to making an individual more senatorial, if you will, just by being there.
He did have some more moderate answers than what I've heard him say, in the media and things like that when he was in Lawrence County. He said some things because I think one person asked him about the Senate Majority Leader, just various things, and his answers was very. I'm not trying to say methodical because methodical can sound negative. I'm saying what he said was, in a sense, was being an effective senator versus using a lot of rhetoric to not imposing your will, but trying to the art of persuasion, as we discussed earlier. He said some things that led me to believe that he would lean towards that, and I was pretty impressed with his answers.
And I think I think he comes around to that if he is elected the U.S. senator. I don't think he is. And look at guys that have gone from the House of Representatives to the Senate, and look how they've changed. That they do, like Marsha Blackburn maybe is an exception. She's a little more outspoken now than she was when she was a congresswoman. But you kind of go in your mind, you go down the checklist of guys that were congressmen that are now U.S. senators, and they're not quite as they're a little more tempered. They're like they've aged and they are a little more mature, or however you want to put it. I think that happens a little bit with Congressman Brooks if he is elected to the Senate.
Well, we could sit here and go on all night. I mean, hey, we're just three buds sitting here talking now. So, we all three like and enjoy politics. But that being said, we are at an hour for the podcast. So we're going to have to kind of wrap it up here. Russ, you had something?
I want to know y'all's predictions. Gavin Newsom recall in California. Is it going to happen or not? And obviously it'll be Larry Elder if they vote yes to recall. Do y'all think he's going to be recalled and Larry Elder will be the next governor of California?
It feels like a Brexit situation. Maybe I don't know though. I still if I'm handicapping this, I still think Newsom. I mean, is the remains governor. He doesn't get recalled. I give it 2-1 chance that, or maybe 33% chance that Larry Elder is the next governor of California. But I mean, that's still a sizable possibility. But I don't know. It just, first off, Newsom's got a lot of money, and the second problem is California's it's still so ideologically left. It's not like even when Arnold Schwarzenegger won that recall election, it's changed even more ideologically left of center.
I think Gavin Newsom gets governor or remains governor, but I think it scares the ever-loving crap out of them.
Well, you got to remember,
closer than what they want. I hope Larry Elder gets it.
You got to remember too now, California, even though we always want to say, they're left coast, that they're far left, I figured out that there's actually a lot of more moderate or central people, but it's just not. It's not in the big metropolitan areas where all the liberals are. They're, up North California.
They're in the Central Valley, Bakersfield, Fresno, those places, but there's just not enough. There's just not enough people in those places.
Right. So I think that Newsom stays, but I'm like Jeff. I mean, it's a crapshoot with what actually happens because of that very thing. So. All right, guys. Well, Jeff, appreciate you coming on with us tonight. If y'all want to take and check out Jeff, you can pull him up on your own podcast.
FMTalk1065.com. You can, I say the one-stop kind of clearinghouse for everything I do. Landyap, Breitbart, Yellowhammer, and FMTalk1065 is twitter.com/Jeff_Poor. And you can see usually all the stories I write. I try to tweet them out, and there's links to the podcast and all that. So if you're really interested, and you didn't get enough of the last hour, then I promise you, there's 3 hours more a day.
Hey, we could sit here for another 2 hours easily, I'm sure, just discussing stuff. I mean, hey, I miss you being up here personally. You would come over to our meetings and stuff, and just enjoyed having you. I mean, getting to know you and everything. So it's a joy for me, and I think for Russ too, to get you on here to sit and talk. So, but that being said, if you're watching us on YouTube, make sure that you give us a thumbs up, give us that like, and hit the subscribe button. Help us grow our channel. If you're listening to us on the podcast, hey, we'd love to have a 5-star from you. Hit the subscribe buttons. We're on, I don't know, about 10 different podcast services now. So, and if you want to learn more about Jeff, you follow him on Twitter, Facebook, and the website there for the radio station. Let's see. Got any dad jokes before we go, Jeff?
No, I'm not quite there yet, man.
All right. Well, Russ, I will say good night to everybody, and see y'all next week. Russ, Jeff, I'll give y'all the last words.
Y'all be careful.
War Eagle, and thanks for putting up with my long-winded responses.
Hey, War Eagle, brother.
Go UNA.
All right.